big sky, big potential. In association with Mills and Reeve, this is Eastern Promise. Achieving more together. Welcome to episode 99 of Eastern Promise, where we take the best of the east of England and add the chocolate flake of excellence. I'm your host and neighbourhood Mr. Softy, Mike Rigby. This week we go west, West Norfolk to be exact, to the Hanseatic port of King's Lynn. It has an incredibly deep, rich heritage, replete with heroes and villains, chief amongst them the greatest wordsmith in the English language, William Shakespeare. Mix with an exciting and dynamic vision for King's Lynn's future, and you have the makings of an extraordinary opportunity for renewal. I'll be finding out how culture and heritage will help build King's Lynn a brighter, more prosperous future. All on this episode of Eastern Promise.
And in one of the most famous monologues that Shakespeare ever wrote, Hamlet says, "I have heard that guilty creatures, while sitting at play, if they see something," and I'm going to paraphrase, "that reminds them of what they've done, they will scream out and confess their guilt." And that's the monologue. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king.
Tim Fitzhigham, Cultural Director of St George's Guildhall.
So it's a really important bit of Shakespeare, and it's based on an event that took place in the very room that we're standing in. The documents couldn't be clearer. They say in the theatre in Lynn, Norfolk. There is nowhere else in the world that has a room that is directly associated with a plot from Shakespeare in that way.
King's Lynn was much in the news after the stage upon which William Shakespeare himself performed was discovered under the floorboards of the Guildhall itself. The potential stemming from that discovery is undeniably exciting. Yet the find represents just a fraction of a much wider and deeper plan to deploy the heritage and culture of King's Lynn as a tool for regeneration. Because, if you'll forgive a small indulgence on the audio front, the story of King's Lynn is a story of adventure. Exploration. Trade. Witches. Murder. And inevitably, pirates. Matey. Join me now, if you will, to explore all of this in the company of Tim Fitzhigham, interim chair of the Town Deal Board, Vicky Etheridge, the now deputy leader of the Borough Council of King's Lynn and West Norfolk, as well as cabinet member for culture, Simon Ring, and the now leader of the Borough Council, Alistair Beales. Let's start with Simon and Alistair.
Alistair, I'll start with you. How will the Borough Council take the fantastic assets driving through the town? You can see it's got, as they say, it's got good bones. How is the Borough Council using those assets and taking them forward into the town deal and all the stuff that's surrounding that?
I think the answer is that, and starting with the good bones, I'm sure you've heard it before. If you haven't, there's more listed buildings here than there is in York, which puts it in context.
Really?
People are all surprised.
Yes.
But given the heritage of King's Lynn, the Hanseatic background, the age of the town, people shouldn't be quite surprised. But the fact they are surprised, we haven't been making the most use of our assets. So here we are standing in historic Guildhall, as you've said. We've got the Customs House, one of the most significant buildings anywhere in the country, never mind in King's Lynn. So it goes on. So there's always been, I think, an ambition to do something about these assets, to bring them more into public use. This building that we're standing in is not perhaps in the best of repair, but there's never been the money. And the Town Deal Board has delivered the money to do two things. First, to repair the infrastructure, but also to improve it, and to raise the public profile, which is Councillor Ring's.
We'll come on to him. He'll get his turn.
His skills, as it were, in selling, raising the profile. Because what we want to do, if we don't get people through here, and in this building in particular, school children enjoying the history, Shakespeare's a bit dry and dusty, isn't it? Not if you can come here and you can see where the man actually trod. They performed here. History, actually real. You can touch it. That's what we're all about. Public engagement, raising the profile, making the most of our town. Because unfortunately, you drive past Kingsley, you don't see all this. So we've got to sell it better and get people here.
Absolutely. And as we said, Simon, the assets are fantastic. You've got such a deep history and a deep story here, which we'll come on to with Tim a bit later. But how do you start taking that as a council and turning that into a story, a narrative that you can go to government and knock on the door and say, Mr. Hunt, here's our plan, here's what we want to do?
What you have to demonstrate that there's some ambition, and you have to demonstrate that there's community involvement in all of this, because you can't drive this from the front if no one's attached to the back. And that's one of the reasons why I got involved in becoming a councillor in the first place. I've lived here all my life, and I've known how wonderful this place is, and I've been frustrated all my business life that we have not been promoting these assets properly to the wider community here, let alone the wider community in this country or internationally. So getting some pride in the place that we live in is the starting point, because if people here don't appreciate what we've got, how are we supposed to sell it out there? And I started with some friends a website called Time Machine Kings Lynn, which was started by us as a frustration that these assets weren't being promoted properly. And they weren't being portrayed in the right way. And we have so many. I mean, Alistair said about having more listed assets than York. We've also got more listed assets per capita than Bath, second only to Bath in the country. So,
second only to Bath.
So if you were to say, I'm going to go on a heritage trip, how many people do you know that would go, oh, well, let's go to Kings Lynn? They would say, let's go to York. They'd say, let's go to Bath. They might even say Chester or London. They're not going to say Kings Lynn. That's our fault, because we've not promoted it properly. If you Google the oldest working theatre in this country, you don't get St George's Guildhall, and yet it is.
But that's a crime, isn't it?
Absolutely,
it is.
And the reason the Google doesn't tell you that is because we don't talk about it enough. Because that's how the algorithms work in Google. Google will go out there and look at all these events, and they'll tell you it's the Bristol Old Vic, but it's not. It's the St George's Guildhall, and that is our fault as a town, as a people in the town, as a council. But there are now, and have been for quite some time, some fantastic community groups that are trying to promote all of these assets, not just the Guildhall, but the Custom House, the Red Mount, the South Gates, the town hall, and so on and so on. And now that there is a council that has got the same ambition as those volunteers, we join that together. That's the starting point. But getting young people to love the place they live, and Tim, who you're going to speak to later, and Jane, have done a fantastic job of getting kids in here. I've got a Give you an example. I've got a 5-year-old grandson who said to me the other night, as I was reading his story. He said, name me some writers, Pop. And I went through all the classics, Roald Dahl, and he went, no, the one with the big thing round his neck. He's 5, and he knew who Shakespeare was. So you get that love of Shakespeare and history. You get youngsters in a place like this at that age, and the passion on knowledge and desire to learn more is just osmosisly drawn into them. And that's what we've got to do more of, so that we can promote this place naturally without even thinking about it.
Yes.
And we do that the opposite. A friend of mine, when first came to Kings Lynn in the 80s, said Kings Lynn is the graveyard of ambition.
Do you know what? I'm going to arrange a posse, old styley. Like, I'm going to ride around, and The number of people who say that, it infuriates me because it isn't.
It isn't,
No,
absolutely.
it really
isn't.
No.
It isn't.
There's so much good stuff going on here, and this is. I'll tell you what. I went to Thetford, and with the partnership manager there, Jack Weaver, who's now at the Chamber of Commerce, we did a walk and talk around the town, which is pretty much what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
And you could see that, like here,
Yeah.
the assets were fantastic. I mean, you've got Thomas Paine, great son of Thetford. You've got like a captive audience of Americans, you know.
Yeah, quite.
So you know, I mean, okay, there's the slight anti-monarchist bit, which might be trouble. But aside from all that, it's the same. You've got the story. I mean, you've got such a rich story to tell, not just about Shakespeare, but the whole history of it.
Yeah.
And I really admire, Simon, your taking of that responsibility and saying, OK, that's on us. But together, we can begin to change that. And Alistair, could you just reflect for me on the collaboration the council has been a part in building to get this over the line?
Yeah, that's a really important aspect, because what I was going to do is take us back to where does the funding come from? Because it's levelling up funding from central government, essentially. There's input from Borough Council, of course, strategic partners like Norfolk County Council, who put a lot of money in, but essentially it's levelling up. So why is that? It's because our community faces some challenges. That's where that money comes from, level up to where others are. So, as Simon has described, we have to involve our community, because I've reported this. We all look after parish councils. I've got 7 parish councils. I've reported it to all of them, and they said, great. What's in it for us? What's in it for the community? And that's absolutely the right question. What's in it for the community is pride. You know, we've got the oldest working theatre that actually Shakespeare was performed here. Who else can say that?
Yeah.
We've got the Customs House, which we haven't really been able to get into before. Now it'll be open and accessible. But how have we done that? We've done that with a huge amount of commitment and work from the private sector. The Borough Council is the delivery body, but the early decisions, getting the money, writing the business plans, we've done all in cooperation with the business community, who've given an enormous amount of time to this. Now, why have they done that? Because they saw, well, we've got some money here, and what can we do? Like all of us, but perhaps some of them more than us, because we're local councillors, we know what's here. Look at the opportunity we've got. This is worth some sweat on our brow to get this done, and they have. They've got it to this stage where the money's in place, the projects are decided. It's not enough money, because this is a good example, this building. And the budget was...
We keep lifting floorboards.
Well, quite. The budget was,
do it again!
Quite. The budget was created without any knowledge of this building, never been architecturally assessed in its entire existence, which, given the many hundreds of years it's been here, is quite extraordinary. But is that a problem? No, it's because there's more opportunities, because we've now got a floor.
Exactly.
You know, so
Exactly.
there's just more opportunities.
And there's more revelations. I can't
More
tell you
to
what,
come.
but there's more revelations
more
to
to
come.
come.
Well,
that have
more
already
to
been
come.
discovered, and it is phenomenal what this building is offering us. It's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
I am Vicky Etheridge. I am the manager of the Business Improvement District, otherwise known as Discover Kings Lynn, and I am currently interim chair of the Town Deal Board.
Fantastic. And for those who may not know, what is a town deal?
Well, it's 2 things. It's a pot of money, the town funds, the Town Deal Fund, and it's also a body of people who are the board that have been brought together to come up with a strategy and implementation plan, really, to spend those funds. So, and the Town Deal is part of the levelling up agenda, and we were given the funds with certain conditions, so it wasn't quite a blank cheque of 20
No,
well, not
the-
blank
the-
cheque,
the
nor
Treasury
is
is
it
not
the
known.
unconditional 25 million. I think those things are quite hard sometimes to get across to the public, because they see the headlines, don't they? You hear the news.
It's just
25
ka-ching, isn't it,
million,
you know?
ka-ching, ka-ching. But of course, there's always conditions. Quite rightly so. It's public money, isn't it? It's not going to come with like,
Yes.
here you go, Kings Lynn, spend it as you wish. With that money comes the conditions around, time it needs to be spent by. It's predominantly capital money, and the things they want you to achieve with it. It's not just about doing up an old building, just to simplify matters. With that's got to come economic outputs, like job creation, like how it's going to benefit the local economies. There was a huge amount of work to be done at the beginning of the process to come up with that vision. What is our plan? How are we going to use these funds really as a catalyst? It's the starting point, because 25 million is a lot, but at the same time, it's not a lot.
It's not a lot, no,
It's not
it
a lot.
sounds
And
a
especially
lot.
when you start to look at heritage, it really isn't a lot, because that costs even more and takes even longer and needs real, expertise in coming up with the right plan. So that money doesn't actually go as far as you think. And of course, with the cost of living, none of it goes as far as any of us wanted it to go.
And it goes less and less far as time goes on.
So we spent a long time. There was, if you like, a big front-loading process of coming up with business plans of how we were going to get those funds around projects to then meet the targets that government wanted us to, in terms of jobs created and buildings renovated and cycle lanes put in and all those sorts of things. So that was on reflection, a long, hard process. And now we're in that delivery phase. And I think what's, for me, wearing my business improvement district hat, and actually a lot of the businesses in the town centre are relatively small, a lot of them are independent, they want to see results, and I think it's hard for the public too. You're taking them on this journey, the funds are announced, and actually it's quite a long time before they even see stuff happening. That doesn't help, does it? Public funds perception doesn't help people's perceptions or trust, I suppose, of the public sector, in the sense that it's like, here we go again, they've got the money, they've taken ages to spend it, when actually it's not that easy.
No, you can't just rush in and fripper
easy to go and spend 25 million, but it's not. I know, but it's not that easy. And I think you've got to keep that woohoo. Yeah. You somehow got to try and keep hold of it and keep it along with you. And I think the other thing we've really tried to keep hold of is that sense of, this is the beginning, but this is the beginning of building and growing ambition. And so we want these projects to be aspirational and to really start to create the town that we know Kings Lynn can be.
Tim Fitzhigham, cultural director, actor, comedian, and anyone who's read things like the Norwich Festival Guide or the theatre guides from Norwich and Kings Lynn will have seen your face in those programmes many times over the years. But now you are at the helm of one of probably the most exciting cultural discoveries, certainly I've ever heard about in Norfolk, and I've lived in Norfolk 25 years. Where to start with the questions I want to ask you? Yeah. To someone who's a trained actor, what does a discovery like these floorboards mean to you?
Well, it's been quite a journey so far. I mean, I came to the Guildhall and I performed here many times, as you know. My parents performed here on that very stage over there. And I've always had a big love for the Guildhall. And I was really worried when, in or around 2016, it did look like the Guildhall was about to shut. And I really thought that everybody needs to just take a pause and work out exactly what we had here before they made a decision to close it. And so I started trying to do the research to prove the stories that I'd always been told about this venue, the stories that I grew up knowing. You know, people in Kings Lynn have known that Shakespeare performed here for a very long time, and they've handed it down from generation to generation. And I knew that story as a kid growing up here in West Norfolk. And so I thought, but it's all one well and good to sort of know those stories, but it's another thing to prove them. So I set about trying to pull together the documentary research to prove that Shakespeare was here, or at least give us the best case scenario that we could. And that led to, as you very kindly say, me being made the creative director of the site and the cultural officer for West Norfolk, which was a huge departure for me, as you've again said, because my life has been very much based on stage all over the world, going out there every night, making people laugh and getting off and going to another place somewhere, different country, different town, different city, and making people laugh and getting off. And so to come back here to the Guildhall to kind of head up what was a really exciting project was a really unusual decision for me, but an exciting one. Yeah. And has led to us being able to steer this project in a really interesting way, which I think has kind of engaged with the public, and the public generally, people seem really excited about what's going on. As you rightly say, there's an awful lot to unpack. You know, we're standing next to an area of the medieval floor that we were able to confirm is the medieval floor, and of course that means it's the stage that Shakespeare would have performed on when he came here, because of course we're standing now in the Guildhall of St George. It's a very long building. It's certainly the largest medieval Guildhall left extant in the whole country. It's got a massive oak ceiling, which is in a style that we call the Norfolk scissor brace, because the oak beams are shaped like a pair of scissors. And this is the largest Norfolk scissor brace ceiling that we know of anywhere in the country. And we're standing in this huge place. But if we'd have been here 400, 500 years ago, this would have looked very different. At the moment, we're in what is a 1963 interior that was designed by a man called Bleakley, Graham Bleakley, and it's very much set out a bit like a cinema for the listener. That's how it looks, probably, isn't it?
Yes,
Red
it does.
seating, very like a cinema. But if we go back 400 years, we would have come in through a doorway that's in the south wall of the Guildhall, that's currently bricked up, just actually where the stage is now. And we would have walked through a passageway with 2 doorways on our right-hand side. And those 2 doorways would have been below a minstrel's gallery, which is on that stage there. It's not there now, but of course it would have been 400 or 500 years ago. And we would have come into the Guildhall through those 2 doorways. And of course that's where the servants and the serving people would have come through with food for the great guild feasts that went on. Now we know that the Guild of St George was essentially the party guild. That's everything in the documents. That's what we're getting from the documents. We're getting the fact that the posh guild was the one in the other Guildhall that we have, the other amazing Guildhall of King's Lynn of Holy Trinity, which is now our town hall. That was a very formal guild, and that became the town hall, largely because it was a much more kind of posher, more formalised guild structure, whereas the Guild of St George, being at the north end of King's Lynn, was a slightly more piratey affair. Certainly the original guarantor of the letters patent, the charter from the King in 1406 that set up this Guildhall, one of the members of the 3 that are mentioned is John Brandon, who, as we know, became a staggeringly wealthy man. Really, really rich, and a lot of his money is maybe what we see around us today in this Guildhall, but also was accused of piracy. And there's quite a lot of legal documents from the late 1390s that accuse Brandon of stealing large amounts of oak, large amounts of brick. You know, there's a lot of the building materials that we may have around us that do appear in legal documents about Brandon. So it's always had this slightly less formal, perhaps, reputation, I think it's fair to say. And it was also open to men and women from the start, the Guildhall of St George. So that's a really interesting and unusual, perhaps, for that period situation. We know the Guild had 4 minstrels on a retainer, and we know that they had 4 priests on a retainer. So they were clearly balancing their sort of outcomes.
Hedge your bets.
Yeah, exactly. So we now know archaeologically, and this is new news just in, that the chapel of St George was downstairs. So you would have come through the chapel of St George on your way upstairs to the Guildhall that we're in now. But of course, when Shakespeare came here in 1592-93, or Shakespeare's company, he would have come into an environment that hadn't changed that much since the Guild left. Because we think not a lot had changed in the internal volume of the Guildhall, although we're doing a lot more archaeology to try and work that out, because there are some weird clues that might turn out to be something that changed. It's a massive jigsaw puzzle, this whole site, this whole building. And we keep doing archaeology to try and unlock that.
Now, for the listener, you perhaps can't see the excitement and the anticipation almost, and the knowledge of potential in Tim's eyes, but I can. And you've got this, like I've said to Vicky and the councillors, the assets you can feel just walking in. Yes, obviously, time has worked its cruel magic upon them, but the bones are here. The bones are here for something really extraordinary. And I read this in the documents, and you've alluded to it. There's just the rich and thick layering of history. Yeah. You know, and we were saying the globe can't say what you can say.
No. Well, that window behind you was there in 1592. The one you're looking out of now, that's a window that Shakespeare could have looked out of in 1592-93. So that's highly unusual to have a structure where we're that confident, and we still have the fabric. The floor that we're looking at now, that we were able to confirm was the original floor of the Guildhall, is the floor that Shakespeare would have performed on. These are the Bard's boards. These are the boards that he would have performed on. You know, the Norfolk boards. They are the ones. The very ones. Yeah, you can call it what you like. Yeah. They are the very ones that he would have been performing on. And the ceiling above us is the very ceiling that he would have performed underneath. So all of those things are very unique. And more than that, of course, is the event that occurred here in, we're told, 1590s, in 2 documents published in Shakespeare's lifetime. A lady came to watch a play with her new second husband. She was sitting, we're told, and the play was The Murder of Friar Francis. There's a spoiler alert there. And at the point Friar Francis got murdered, we're told that the lady screamed out, "I did it, I killed my husband." And she was taken into custody, she was tried for murder. That's what the documents tell us. Now, it turned out that the lady had murdered her rich first husband to marry her new young second husband, and seeing the murder of Friar Francis on stage made her shout out and confess it. Now, Obviously, then Shakespeare, we're told, hears this story and puts it into Hamlet. And in one of the most famous monologues that Shakespeare ever wrote, "Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I," Hamlet says, "I have heard that guilty creatures, while sitting at play, if they see something," and I'm going to paraphrase, "that reminds them of what they've done, they will scream out and confess their guilt." And that's the monologue. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. So it's a really important bit of Shakespeare, and it's based on an event that took place in the very room that we're standing in. The documents couldn't be clearer. They say in the theatre in Lynn, Norfolk. There is nowhere else in the world that has a room that is directly associated with a plot from Shakespeare in that way.
I mean, that is just, wow.
And now
what
we've
do you
got
say
the floor
to that?
too.
Yeah, it just tingles. Because you've just really outlined the magnificent history here in a way that far better than I ever could. But you've got all this. And you're on this steep learning curve from actor and comedian to sort of pseudo civil servant and cultural director.
Yeah.
And this must be kind of a journey for you. But
the Everest of journeys.
I know. We were talking earlier about kind of the Disneyland angle, but in that when you're queuing for rides at Disneyland, they put on a lot of things around you to sort of make the queue, bearable and worthwhile. So how do you keep, as cultural director, the local community engaged with this project while bureaucracy takes its course? Because the thing about democracy is you can't rush it.
No.
It won't be rushed because people want their say. But how do you keep people engaged? What are you doing to keep people engaged in this?
It's vital that you take everybody along with you. This is a nationally important building. It's an internationally important building, but it is also very much so an important building in Kings Lynn. There's people like me whose parents performed here. They performed there. There's lots of other borough officers who started doing tap dancing on that stage when they were tiny in little skirts and shorts and dresses and tiny tap shoes. So there's so many happy memories that are associated with this place for the people of Kings Lynn. And above all else, that's very, very special and very important. And you've got to try and take everybody along. Now, not everybody is going to enjoy the same plan as everybody else. Everybody accepts that. But we've got to try and get to a place where this building is financially viable, sustainable, and stays in good nick for the next 600 years. It's the oldest working theatre in the country, and we want it to continue being the oldest working theatre in the country. It's only a working theatre as long as it can afford to stay open. And that's absolutely critical to the success of our plans, both for this building and for the broader plans for Kings Lynn. Kings Lynn has more Grade 1 listed buildings, I think I'm right, per square metre than anywhere else in the country. It's never had a golden hook. We've always tried to say, look, this is important in Lynn, that's important in Lynn, this is important in Lynn. What the Towns Fund has done is to realise that we need that one thing that we can go, come to Lynn, see this, and then you can see all the other things. And that's what we're trying to do with this. This is why the Guildhall is the priority project for the Towns Fund, because the Towns Fund, and I have to say our political leadership as well, has seen the potential of this as a golden hook, golden egg, call it what you like, a principal attraction for Kings Lynn and West Norfolk. As I say, there's nowhere else in the country that has quite the stories that this site has got. It's the only place in the world to have a recorded history of drama in 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 1900 and still going on to this day. Tomorrow night we've got the Witch and the Egg. Something I'm sure Shakespeare would have been very proud of, in fact, and owes a lot, I would say, to the first couple of scenes of the Scottish play. But it's trying to do things like that keep this place absolutely humming and busy. You've seen today, of course, we've got schools running all over the building again, and that's something we're really trying hard to do, because it's not just about people that have performed here in the past, it's about people that will perform here in the future.
This is the Custom House.
Yes.
And this is one of the Town Deal Board projects. It's a challenge to do the things that we really would love to do to it because of its Grade 1 listed status and the importance of some of the features that we would like to do something with to make it more usable.
Yeah.
But there's always this balance between heritage harm and public benefit.
Yes.
And the great and the good in the heritage world have a duty, responsibility to maintain these heritage issues. I mean, here's a good example. What we really ideally would love to do is take all of that out and make that clear glass, because these would originally, when this was originally built by Henry Bell.
Yes.
Don't you dare.
Don't I dare what?
Try to open up those.
They won't be. They won't be. Trust me, they won't be.
If you've got anything to do with it.
No, they won't be. The problem here is, I mean, these would originally not have been there. This would have been open, because obviously underneath would have been open. They were filled in probably about 30 to 50 years after Henry Bell first built this. And these windows here,
right, yes.
and these windows here are believed to be the original windows that were put in at that time. So although there's an argument that says take it out because the original would have been not there in the first place, so you're going back to the original form, they've been like this for way, way longer than the original
years.
Form was.
Yes, we have a local expert, yes.
And so Historic England, they have a responsibility to look at the heritage damage that you would do to do certain things, and they are saying no. They are saying that taking that out would do more heritage damage than otherwise. So this is an example of a living process of how you restore and bring back a building like this, with the challenge of the heritage harm versus the public good and public use. Because absolutely everybody, and this gentleman will, I'm sure, agree.
What's your name, sir?
Sorry?
What's your name, sir?
It's Eric.
Eric?
I'm sure, Eric, you would agree that we desperately need to get this building more open, as in used, so that people can go in there and access it.
It's a beautiful
The
asset.
first floor...
Cost of
Well, the first floor is immense, and the second floor, and this is a building that has to be created more accessible for everybody.
It's such a wonderful asset.
Well, it's one of the biggest challenges for Historic England and National Trust and organisations like that is that they naturally have buildings that are not accessible.
Yeah.
Because they weren't. I mean, you can't get a wheelchair up the top there, for instance.
No.
And the drive is about making all buildings of that nature as accessible to as many people as possible. And you can't.
I agree, but not at the cost of.
Well, and that's Historic England's responsibility is to balance that at the cost of. So what is acceptable loss to heritage compared to what is not acceptable loss to heritage, and that's their job.
It is a very tricky balancing act, because previous generations obviously didn't. How do I put this? Didn't give a hoot. They just wanted it how they wanted it, and they did it how they did it. And now we're a democracy, thank goodness. These things now, and people like Eric here have that. I need to have their say and need to be heard.
Absolutely.
And you said earlier, when we were talking earlier, you need to take the public with you.
Yeah,
and what is wonderful is that you've got this asset, which is kind of like, this is one of the key landmarks in a wonderful town.
It's on everything, isn't it?
It's on everything.
It's on everything.
The plaque.
Around the front,
around the front.
door.
We'll go and have a look at the plaque, but we must, I'm afraid, move on.
We need to move on to other areas.
But thank you, Eric.
Thank you for your input, Eric.
What did the discovery of these floorboards do to the plans already in place? Was it a kind of a pause before turbocharge, or did you have to say, right, this is great, but we have to kind of rethink and make the most use?
It was that latter. It's like, this is great, and it's causing us a little bit of headache, because clearly we now want to make the most of this, but that's going to take some time to figure out how we do that. How will that affect the plans that we've got? How might those plans, where might that spin out into, and where do people like Historic England take a view on some of this? So what might our options be? So it immediately added time, because you've got to start thinking about, how do we incorporate these? How many of those boards are they? To what extent do they, how far do they spread, so to speak? What are we going to do with them? What might we be able to do with them? We clearly would like to have them on display. How do you do that for all? So there was a lot. It has thrown up lots of questions and options, and I think it's about, as always, weighing up which option is going to work the best for us with the money and the time that we've got, I mean, undoubtedly, it's thrown up problems because it's challenging. It's, you know, we'd got a really great scheme, and then we got the floorboards, and it's like, okay, we now need to redraw that. The designs for the theatre, actually, how do we can't just carry on with those designs because that would cover up the floorboard. But then maybe that's what we need to do to protect them. So it's threw up all those sorts of questions, and we haven't yet. I don't think we're not yet decided on the right, or not the right, because there'll be more than one right. But we haven't yet chosen the option to take forward. So, but undoubtedly, it's a brilliant thing, isn't it? So
no, because you're right,
and only lends to that story that we're trying to tell, and in drawing those people in. So, you know, it's a great thing.
It kind of widens your horizons, but at the same time, you have to sit and think and not just go, oh great, we got this money, we can splurge that on this now. You've got to sort of say, okay, this change, as you say, this changes the plan. And you mentioned historic England, and I'm just curious. I love that doing this because I can just chase curiosity wherever it leads. When something like this is uncovered. And it reminds me of The Dig, which is, as you know, you all the Netflix film and obviously the real life thing. You always get kind of both national, and you'll get, I don't know, people from the hour at Stratford or something coming over and saying, hang on a minute, you know, this is our jurisdiction now. Was an element of that, it's like, or was it very much, this is great, can we come and have a peek?
Do you know what? I don't think I can answer that question.
Excellent.
You'll have to ask Tim.
There we go.
I don't think we've had anyone kind of going, oh, no, stand back, Kings Lynn, they will now take over. That hasn't happened.
Good. So Shakespearean cones and tape hasn't gone around it. That's wonderful.
No, I'm pretty certain that hasn't happened.
You've got that money, the town deal money, Alistair.
Yeah.
How do you now leverage that? Not just sort of go, oh, we'll spend it. How do you leverage that into more investment?
Well, that's already happened to some degree, that strategic partners have put the money in. But that's a real question here. What's one of the biggest selling brands in the world is Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So you'll hear from Tim later. He's been over to the Folger Library. However many copies of the first folio they've got. They've raised $83 million, I think. On the basis of that. So we will have to be out there with the fundraising. This will be run by a charity who will have a big role in that. So it's levering the brand, isn't it? But what a brand to lever.
Well, the Globe can't say what you can say.
Yeah,
no,
quite.
They can't.
Exactly.
Quite. No, they can't.
In fact, it's a great building, but you can't say that his feet were here.
If we look at Shakespeare of the North in Prescott, which has got quite a tenuous connection with Shakespeare, they'll say it's there, I'm not going to argue with that, but it's lifted their footfall by 25%. Now, the council are still having to put money in. We're aiming for this thing to generate funds in the fullness of time. So to get the footfall, to get people here, to get pride in our community, to get kids here, but also to make it sustainably. At the moment, this building costs the taxpayer a serious amount of money every year to not realise its potential. We want to realise its potential and not send the bill to the taxpayer.
For those who don't know, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but those who don't know, it's on the sign as you come to the Hanseatic town of Kings Lynn.
Yeah.
Hanseatic, people might have heard of the Hanseatic League. Do you want to just, being a history nut, I'm going to ask you to unpack that, and what does that mean? What is that?
The Hanseatic League, back in the medieval times, being a tradesman on the high seas was a dangerous thing to do.
Yes.
Because pirates were about. To get from A to B, you had to be sure you're gonna get there. So you often employed vessels that went alongside you that protected you. And the Hanseatic League was a group of cities around Northern Europe who got together to promote that security.
Yes.
And Kings Lynn was one of the English Hanseatic League towns, like Hull was, and others around the North Sea coastline. We have the only Hanseatic warehouse left in the country, a little bit further down.
Yes.
And their classic features, they're these, like the Marriott warehouse there, they're the very tall, very pointed roof structures.
Yes.
And it was a very, very wealthy league of merchants.
Yeah.
And that's what made Kings Lynn one of the most important ports in the country in those days.
What we're really interested in finding is the next Shakespeare, or the next Robert Armin, Shakespeare's comedian, who was born in the High Street. And let's not forget Armin, because he's really underrated. And we've got a real opportunity there to promote Robert Armin. Armin is a really funny person. His stories and jokes still stack up today. Unlike some early medieval comedians whose jokes we don't quite get, Armin writes about comedy, and he writes about comedy in a way that's actually quite accessible to a modern audience.
Yeah.
Some of Armin's writing could be sitcom from today. It's really that sort of writing. And so we have an opportunity. We now know where Armin lived. I found it in a tax water rates return. It's on the high street. You can go and see it. There's now a little green plaque on the building. And that's part of trying to get people to see broader King's Lynn. If we attract them to the Guildhall with the stories of Shakespeare, or John Brandon the Pirate, or the dragons and their association with St George, we certainly have evidence that the Guild of St George here used to process out into King's Lynn with their dragon procession. They had a castle on wheels, and it must have been an incredible sight to see the Guild of St George leave its amazing hall and go through the streets of King's Lynn on this amazing procession. And we think they did that 4 times a year. So we've got all sorts of stories that are associated with this site, but they relate to, obviously, all the other stories that are in King's Lynn.
I don't know if you've heard about the diamond and the heart on the Tuesday Marketplace.
No.
There's at the far end of the Tuesday Marketplace, on one of the buildings, above a door that is blocked up, there's a diamond with a heart on it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we burnt witches on the Tuesday Marketplace.
As you do.
So the story goes that as
Goblins on Wednesdays.
that building was being constructed, and a witch was burnt, and her heart flew out, and it hit the building, and as it hit the building, she cursed. She had the energy still to curse whoever went through that door. So of course, that door allegedly has never been a door.
Right, we'll fix you. We'll not.
They bricked it up from day one, and you know there are many other similar stories about how. But the question you've got to ask yourself is, why is a diamond with a heart on there? So actually, confabulation is having a grain of truth and then turning it into a big story. So the grain of truth is almost certainly there was a woman being burnt at that time.
Yes.
And she no doubt screamed something. You might not want to put this on, but there is a story that says that witch actually was a prostitute, and the builders frequented her facility, her services. So they were pretty annoyed that she was being burnt.
Yeah.
And the person that accused her of being a witch was the bishop whose house that was going to be. So
I see.
Create the story, get their own back. Right, we're going to get our own back on you. We're going to come up tonight and we're going to put this diamond and heart on there and create the story that she cursed anyone that went through that door.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
I love that story.
It's a great story.
There's a wonderful element of revenge and retribution in that.
I don't necessarily want to leave it at revenge and retribution, but Simon, thank you ever so much for this fantastic. I could go on and on, but
well, please come back.
I will. There's no. I feel like I've only just sort of scratched the surface.
You have.
That's the thing. I was born in King's Lynn, and I love King's Lynn. I think sometimes people don't realise, or maybe they look down on King's Lynn, and that's not fair. King's Lynn's got a lot going for it, and I just think we've been a little bit too good about keeping King's Lynn secret, and it's about time we perhaps reassessed that and said, actually, we've got amazing stuff in King's Lynn that we've kept secret for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now it's maybe time to open the doors and share it.
My thanks to Tim Fitzhigham of St George's Guildhall, Town Deal Board Interim Chair Vicky Etheridge, and from the Borough Council of King's Lynn and West Norfolk, Councillor Simon Ring and Councillor Alistair Beales, now respectively Deputy Leader and Leader of the Council. My thanks too to Michelle Gant and Gemma Curtis for arranging the interviews, and to Eric for his impromptu appearance on the podcast. If you think you know King's Lynn, chances are you haven't been there, because I thought I knew King's Lynn and I simply wasn't prepared for what I uncovered. The town has such fantastic assets, especially an enthusiastic population determined to see the town revived. I'm really excited to see what this injection of funding will achieve, and I look forward to returning very soon. Next week, we will have reached our 100th episode! And we're celebrating in style with Prashant Shah of O2H Group, recorded on location at the UK Real Estate Investment and Infrastructure Forum 2024 in Leeds. We'll be discussing Cambridge Wide Open Day and O2H Group itself. We'll also be joined by an unexpected but very welcome guest, Dr. Andy Williams, Chair of the Oxford-Cambridge Supercluster. I'll also be sharing the highlights of the Aviva and Tech East search for the region's fintech superstars at the grand finale, which took place in the Insurance Titan's beautiful marble halls. That's all to come on an extra action-packed episode 100 from Eastern Promise. Thank you for listening. Until then, bye for now. To hear other episodes of the Eastern Promise podcast and to find out more about what we do, go to our website at easternpromise.org.uk. Eastern Promise is a Priorscroft production in association with Mills and Reeve, achieving more together.